Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Paul Laverne, a registered psychotherapist and a sexual recovery therapist in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. I've been in private practice for 11 years. I specialize in the treatment of compulsive sexual behaviors, as well as helping clients with trauma, depression, anxiety, and relationship issues. I also train other therapists on the treatment of compulsive sexual behaviors. I speak at conferences and events on these issues, as well as how that intersects with prostitution, exploitation, pornography. On this channel, I interview experts, survivors, activists, and academics from around the world on these issues. I'm driven by one main question. Why are there so many dysfunctional and destructive expressions of human sexual behavior? And can that be changed? And I'd like to explore this question from all sides. I'm here today with Mia Doring, who is talking to me all the way from Ireland. Hi, Mia.
Hi.
Mia Doring is a survivor of the Irish sex trade and the author of Any Girl. This is Mia's book, Any Girl. She is also given a TEDx talk on YouTube, and if you Google her name on YouTube, you can listen to her TEDx talk. I want to read the description of the book from the back now to give you a little bit of an idea about Mia. From the outside looking in, the young life of Mia Doring seemed unremarkable. She pursued her studies at a Dublin art college, immersed in a vibrant social scene. Unbeknownst to those around her, Mia's life was anything but ordinary. At age 16, she'd been sexually exploited by an older man, which carved a direct path into the Irish sex trade, where she remained for several years until finally leaving it behind over a decade ago at age 24. In her literary memoir, Mia, who is now a psychotherapist specializing in sexual trauma, excavates her difficult history as she sets about integrating her past with her present-day life. Along the way, Mia presents a passionate refutation of a culture that affirms and applauds the industrialized sexual violation of women and girls, ultimately offering a different way forward for society, one bedded in true understanding and compassion. So let's get started. So Mia, thanks so much for coming and being willing to share about your life experiences and your time in the industry. So I wanted to maybe start with reading an excerpt from your book, if that's okay. And this is, I really encourage people to get this and purchase it. I never met Mia in person, but I think we connected on Instagram. And when I saw that she was a survivor and also an author, I almost immediately ordered her book and read it. It's really blown away. It's a very well, you're a great writer. And your descriptive language is wonderful, and it sort of combines a vulnerability and a raw honesty as well about your experiences, especially how you describe. This is the best thing I've ever come across that really describes the buyers of sex, sometimes referred to as Johns or punters, for those that aren't familiar with that term.
Yeah.
So I want to just, page 11 in the book,
Yeah.
and this is, I guess, at age 24, near the end of your time. And this is what you call the last one, the last punter. From the first chapter called The Last One, Mia writes, the last punter is in his mid-30s, you guess. You're 24 years old and you arrive at the apartment block in South County, Dublin, tucked behind a street of enormous houses and lines of large leafy trees. You're there to do a job and get home again. It's about 9 p.m. You ring the buzzer. You're not feeling anything in particular as you wait to be let in. He has asked you for 30 minutes of your time. When you get to his apartment, the door is already slightly ajar, so you slide in saying hello into the dark. He is tall, standing with his back to you in the middle of an enormous living room. His hands on his hips. He's watching muted American football on a gigantic flat-screen television. The floor is strewn with crisp wrappers, empty takeaway boxes, and clothes. He turns his head as if he has forgotten he buzzed you into the building. He doesn't say hello or make any small talk, and you're a little thrown. Most men say something to ease the awkwardness they're feeling. Usually your role is to make the man feel comfortable, and you're really good at that. This man is completely comfortable in the situation. He walks backwards towards you, eyes glued to the screen and cash in his hands, which he passes to you. Have you got change? He says. No, sorry, you say, and he makes a face, annoyed. Is there somewhere I can get changed, you ask? And he directs you to the bathroom, where the bath is used as a storage space for magazines and books. The unwashed sink is lined with scum and covered in congealed toothpaste, and the mat on the floor is gray with dirt. You wedge yourself behind the door to avoid going in too far and carefully take off most of your clothes. There is a thing you do now before going back in. You put on a mask of sorts, like going on stage to play a character. You will be what the script calls you to be, and the actual you, whoever that is tucked away inside unseen. You take a breath. The punter is standing where you left him, watching the television, hands absurdly on his hips. You give him your biggest smile to dredge some human connection from him. You need to elicit a smile. He does not smile. He barely notices your back. He unbuckles his belt in preparation for a blowjob. 10 years later, you will still hate the sound or sight of the belt unbuckling, but in that moment, you're not yet aware of what you're doing to yourself. He holds your hair in one hand and aggressively pushes and pulls your head back and forth. You're used to it. You can get used to anything. You glance up and he's still watching the television, rubbing his stomach with his other hand. You experience the feeling that comes from total objectification, your humanity erased. To him, you are non-human. You do not exist. You close your eyes and concentrate on breathing. You can feel your eyes watering. He starts to smack the side of your face lightly and you feel on edge. You possess the wordless knowledge that when a man doesn't see you as a human being, he can do anything to you. He smacks you harder, forcing you to kneel up and steady yourself to keep your balance. He pulls your head back and smacks you so hard across the face you fall to the side. All the breath comes up in your throat and your whole body flushes with heat. You're stunned. To punters, that is what women in the sex trade are for, to do what they want with you for a price, to have power over a woman, to have sex when and where and how they want. That's the point, that's the kick of it. By resisting, you are going against this agreement. Of course, this man is wrong to try to force anal sex on you, but you can't say so because you don't know what will happen if you do. It could get much worse. You are alone in an apartment with a much stronger, much bigger person. It is easier psychologically to get through it quietly and persuade yourself that what is happening is fine rather than to put yourself in more danger. You'll remember this sensation of his rough fingers against your face for more than a decade. You will recall this sensation vividly and say a prayer to a God you're not sure you believe in that one day it might fade. Then he takes your hair in his fist and pulls it so far back you can't breathe. You think he might pull it out. You think you're going to die. Then he releases you and lets your face drop back to the floor. You leave through wrought iron gates. The dark tarmac is liquid underfoot. The sky above is black. The air cold against your face. You sit in the car and it hurts to breathe. Your body and bones ache. Your neck is sore and other places are numb. You feel the soft car seat beneath you. You reverse out of the car space just like you do on any other day. How did you end up here? Why are you doing this? It seems to have happened like a natural disaster rather than in any steps you can recognize. But even natural disasters have methodology, though they may seem like spontaneous chaos from the outside. You drive back into the city center to your normal everyday life, your housemates, your friends, your art. This is where it ends. This suburb is where you're going to leave it. In the end, all it took was one hard slap across your face. Yeah, wow. So that was such a gripping opening. I even left some of the more graphic parts out. But I wanted to start with that question that you ask yourself in this chapter. How did I end up here and why am I doing this? So maybe let's start with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a, where did I end up there? It's such a long, complicated story to tell, but I'll keep it to the bullet points.
Yeah.
Without getting too involved, because we'd be here for like 3 hours. Well, how did I get here? Well, so how I see this part beginning is when I was 16, and I'd been raped in a park by another teenager.
Mm.
And that like I was already, you know, as you are when you're 16, I was already insecure. I was trying to find out who I was. I was trying to express myself, like, um, and all that natural stuff that happens when you're 16, 17, 18 got like completely overwritten by this, by being raped.
Mm.
Mm. And it put me into like an extreme state of isolation and loneliness. And I didn't realize, obviously I was traumatized, but I didn't realize I was traumatized. I didn't tell anybody what happened.
You told no one.
No one, no. And I didn't even know that what happened was rape. I
Mm.
just thought something happened, and I was unconscious when it happened. I woke up to him raping me. And even that, even though that's very explicitly rape, um, I was still like, well, maybe I did consent, and I was so drunk, I don't remember. Like I was having this kind of conversation with myself, and I was always trying to justify his behavior because that made it manageable for me rather than actually facing into, actually I was raped. So it took me about a year to realize that I was raped. Um, but within that year, and a much older man came into my life. He would have been in his early 30s, I'm guessing. I don't actually know how old he was, but in my memory of it, he was in his early 30s anyway. And I met him because my friends and I were they were messing around with you know, back in the day, maybe they still exist. You'd have like personal ads in the back of magazines and stuff.
Yeah,
And
well, before the internet, that was how people connected, right?
yeah, like
Wow.
this would have been the year 2000, and we just had mobile phones were like brand new for people my age to have, you know.
Oh, so this is online, but you just mean personal ads online.
No, no, no. This was in an actual
Oh,
magazine.
and
Yeah,
old
yeah,
magazines. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
No, yeah, yeah. And so in this particular magazine, that it wasn't like it was pretty explicit. Like it wasn't Lonely Hearts. You know, it was definitely men wanting sex and stuff like that.
We have
So
one in Toronto, and I'm near Toronto, and there's one that's put out, and it's basically just straight up a platform for escorts and prostitution.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's clearly that. There's no vague language about it,
yeah, yeah.
right? Mhm.
Yeah, and this wasn't men looking for for women in prostitution. This was like men going, "Oh, I need discretion. I want to have like they're looking for sex. They're looking for no string. All this kind of language where it's
Mm.
vague, but you know what they're saying, like no strings attached, blah blah blah. Without those little boxes, you know, and the phone number. So my friends would and I was just watching. I was just looking on. I wasn't like doing this because I was always such an observer and a watcher and kind of a, you know, I'd always be looking at what's going on rather than being super involved. So they were like texting the numbers because we just had phones like new, and it was a new exciting thing to text and stuff. And we'd be ringing the numbers and stuff like that, and just dicking around, you know, and just annoying these people really. And but so it was, for a few minutes, this wasn't a big long thing. They were just messing, but I was very intrigued by this, and I was just drawn to it. You know, I wanted this kind of sexual element of things, and it just felt so shady. And some part of me was really drawn to it. So I
Mm.
robbed the magazine and took it home with me, and I texted some numbers. And I really, this is a bit of a blur. I really can't remember, but I think for most of them, they were like, "You're clearly messing. You know, you're not actually, excuse me, serious or whatever." But one guy was texting me, you know, through texting, discovered that I was in school, and was intrigued by my school uniform and stuff like that. And it's a bit of a long story, so without going into the whole thing, there was the texting relationship, and I had no idea how old he was or anything. The texting relationship went on for quite a while, like over a year. And for me,
A year without meeting him?
yeah, 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 it was
Okay.
on and off. It was very intense, and then there'd be nothing, and then it was very intense again.
Yeah.
And
And was there is this before smartphones, or were you able to send and receive pictures? So no pictures were going. It's all
just text.
texting about like, what did you do today? Oh, you're like, what did you talk about? Was it overtly
Yeah,
sexual or more?
it became sexual
Oh,
very quickly, and he wants to know what my school uniform looked like. He wanted to know things like, "Were you good today?" Things like that. He called me "good girl," like that was his expression. Um, I can't really remember, to be honest with you, but it was
mm,
definitely it was definitely shady. Like there was no doubt about
Yeah.
it. Like it
But
wasn't.
of course, you don't realize you're being groomed, right?
Yeah, and even now I feel weird about that because I was so aware that this was a shady thing. It wasn't like this is my new friend. Um, I knew he wanted me sexually, but that's what I wanted. I wanted that because it made me feel like I was special, and I loved the attention.
Mm.
I loved feeling valued in that way and feeling wanted in that way because the part of me, my sexuality hadn't even begun. Like my first experience of my sexuality meaning anything was when I was on 15 years old on a train, and this old man felt me up for the whole journey into town. And that was my, yeah, I wrote about that in the book. I was like, I
I
wrote,
forgot that part.
yeah, yeah,
You're standing on a train?
sitting on the
Sit-
train. I was going to a French class and in the city centre, and this old man was here at the window seat. It was jam packed, like rush hour, and he stroked up and down my side for the entire journey. And I remember exactly what I was wearing. I remember my blue CD man, my disc man. Do you remember that?
So did you freeze? Like, did you
Yeah,
just
I did
kind
that
of,
one.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Freeze
I sat there.
response. Mm.
I absolutely froze. I didn't know what was going on, and it was very confusing because I was like, he's not like it's my side. You know what I mean? It wasn't
Right.
like
It's not my breast or my leg, like my butt or anything, right? Yeah. So is it sexual? Like, is it inappropriate?
and
Like,
also,
yeah,
is it
but
even happening? Like, is it
right. Is
actually
this really
happening?
happening? Yeah.
Because it
Hmm.
was such a gentle stroke.
Right. Didn't
Yeah.
hurt or anything. Yeah. Hmm.
No, it wasn't like he was feeling around my body. It was just gently stroking up and down my side, and I just sat there. And I remember feeling this rage. And when I was
Oh.
when I was getting off the train, because I endured
Hmm.
this for about 25 minutes, I'd say the journey is 30 minutes. And then when we were getting off, I remember feeling this massive rage and looking back at him and connecting with my eyes with his eyes. And in that moment, realizing, oh, he knew what he was doing there. This old guy, I was like,
What did you see in his eyes?
I don't know, an awareness of some kind. I'm not really sure. Like,
Did he kind of have that dead, vacant stare, or like you sensed something, didn't you?
it wasn't a vacant stare.
Predator? Did he look like a predator looks?
He looked at me like, and I can't quite remember, but I remember knowing that he knew,
You knew
like we
that he
both
knew.
knew in that
Yeah,
moment what
interesting.
had
Right,
happened.
right.
And I was 15 years old,
Mm,
so angry. Um, and then he melted off. He disappears. Quite quickly. He shuffled off through the people, and was very packed. But I remember like writing in the book about how that was my first experience of my sexuality. Apart from catcalls and stuff like that. Um, this was like the first time somebody had touched me in a sexual way, and it was an old man on a train, and I'm going to remember that forever. And how unfair is that? But yeah,
mm,
my sexuality really hadn't had a chance to be known to me, or for me to connect to it when I was raped. So it was all fucked up. Like it was all like, um I guess there was a part of me that really wanted that broken part of me, but that part of me, that wounded part of me, to get attention and get love, or get positive attention, and that sense of like, yeah, my sexuality is worth something, and it has to be like, it felt good that it was so explicit.
mm.
When really what I needed was to find my own way to connect with it myself, not look outside for it. But anyway, but of course we don't know what we're doing when we're traumatized, and also when we're 16, we
Well,
don't
you
know.
don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, and when you're 16 years old, how are you supposed to have any sort of
You
wisdom
don't
around?
know much.
No,
Yeah,
it's
and me,
so
I'm curious, did your parents at any point, or any adult, sit down and say, this is what boundaries are, this is what's appropriate, this is what isn't. If anyone touches you in these parts of your body without you asking, that's called sexual abuse. You can come and tell us, no, those
no,
conversations happen. No, nothing,
no,
nothing.
no, no,
Okay.
no.
So that probably explains why you didn't feel like you had a safe place to go to share your experiences.
Yeah, no, we didn't talk about sex. We didn't talk about sexual assault, like none of that, which is quite usual for an Irish family.
In
Um,
Canada as well.
yeah, I think
It's
so.
almost the universal story of my clients.
I think so. Like it's getting better now, like much better now for
It
parents. Like,
is. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. like they have, it's open, talking about like, what do you do when someone stops you on the road, and if they tell you that they're my friend, what do you do, and or whatever. So
We
that's
do
great.
so much, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm just thinking, like, we do so much damage by being silent, don't we, about that? It's like a
Yeah,
lie, it's like a lie of omission,
yeah, and it's
right?
harmful by omission, right? So
Harm
it's,
by omission. Thank
yeah,
you. That's better.
harm
That's
by
a better way
omission.
of saying it.
I
Yeah.
think it was Gabor Mate or somebody like that had this great little sound bite of saying like, trauma is also what doesn't happen. Do you know, just as a
Mm.
kind of an add-on to that, what you were saying, like it's, trauma is also what doesn't happen. It's also like what you didn't receive, or what conversation didn't happen. I'm not saying,
Yeah. Because let's say shortly after that, mom or dad said, hey, Mia, we should talk about some things, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, well, now that you mention it, mom, dad, this guy did this to me on the train.
yeah, yeah,
Right. And then oh, okay, I'm really sorry. What happened? That was inappropriate. This is what you can do next time. You can tell us, or, right?
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. But it was very much shamey feeling, and there's something about me that made that happen to me, and it's like that usual thing that happens with sexual assault, where you feel like my body is kind of shameful now that happened to it. Um, so I'm absolutely not going to share that, because I don't want to risk increasing the shame. What if I get judged? Or what if somebody says to me, why didn't you talk to someone else? Why didn't you raise the alarm at the passenger? Why didn't you do this? That's what you don't want to happen. So it's such a risk to tell people in your life like that something happened. And I think,
Yeah, I don't even ask that question anymore. Like, why didn't you tell anybody? Because I already know the answer. And it's not
so,
helpful,
yeah,
because you
yeah,
just kind of shame them more, like, oh, I should have told somebody. So my
yeah,
trauma is more my fault than ever. Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So
so we're 15, creepy guy on train, 16, rape, 16, 17,
this guy,
texting guys from the personal ads. Is
yeah,
that right so far? Okay.
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And he yeah, we were texting for about a year, and then he wanted to meet me, and I knew what his fantasies were and stuff like that. Like this wasn't like I knew it was all dodgy.
So sorry, the guy you've been texting wants to meet you in person now, about a year into
Yeah,
it. Okay.
yeah,
And you agree?
yeah. It took a long time. Then eventually I agreed, and I went out. I was 17-ish, and I went out to his house and our house, and he made me wear this like pornified school uniform, and
Hmm.
I wasn't expecting this. Like he just made me do it, and he made me put my hair in plaits and stuff like that. He was into the whole schoolgirl thing. Like that was his whole
So
thing.
you go to his house and he says, here, put these clothes on.
Yeah, yeah,
And they're the schoolgirl. It's funny, it's a theme in porn, very prevalent theme in pornography as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. This tiny little skirt, and
Yeah.
these underwear and a t-shirt and knee socks. Like, ugh, so gross.
When you see girls today with uniforms on, is it still like something common?
No, because they're normal school uniforms. In fairness, um,
Oh, okay.
he did with long skirts. He did offer. He did say to me, "Would you prefer?"
Okay.
Um, in a text or something, he said, "Do you want
Mhm.
to bring your own uniform?" And I was like, "No, thanks."
Okay.
Um, so that was uncomfortable. I didn't like him. Like I didn't get good vibes from him.
Right.
But I wasn't there for that. I was there for this sexual attention. Right?
Yeah.
I'm looking back now.
And he
It was,
photographed you, right? Like I remember from the book that wasn't
I,
it all about getting posing you as well so he could take pictures?
yeah, and that didn't happen initially. So, but the main thing that happened at that first time when I was leaving, um, he said at the door, and he goes, "Here's some pocket money," and he gave me two £50 notes,
Oh,
so £100.
a
Was
lot of money when you're 16 or 17.
yeah, it was pounds back then, and yeah, it was a lot of money. So I wasn't expecting this. He didn't say I'm going to pay you, so I was happy about this. And what happened in the previous couple of hours was magicked away by this money. I was like, however I felt about it, should I say, it was magicked away. My
What do you say? Magicked away?
yeah, it was kind of like how I felt about what happened, my discomfort around him, my dislike of him, my boundaries being crossed, the way I didn't like him whispering into my ear or dragging me around by my hair, but he'd grab a plait, or whatever. Um, all that stuff, well, how I felt about all that was smoothed by the money, right? So
Okay,
I left
right.
and I was
I've never heard that phrase, but I know what you mean now.
yeah, so that really kind of it compensated me for what had gone on, how I felt about that. Because it's hard to tune in. Now I can tune into myself because I'm so self-aware with like, oh, I'm excited about this and I'm also uncomfortable. I'm just gonna sit with this, right? And
Mhm.
just see what's going on here. Because this is like very what's the words? Contradictory emotions happening, right? But back then you're just like grand money, deadly, wonderful. I've got money. This is exciting. I can spend it on stuff. I don't have any money. It's great. And you're like, woof, you're not sitting around in introspection when you're 16. You're just like, great.
Yeah. Well, and is it like I did this, but now I'm looking at the money going, maybe that wasn't so bad?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh
is
yeah.
that what you mean by magicked away? It's like that. Okay, I guess it wasn't that bad. And
Oh yeah. It was like
here's £100.
yeah, my feelings were my feelings of in discomfort, etc., were paid for, right? So I got paid for feeling.
Oh,
And
right.
so that's I think that's what landed with me. I think because it made I wouldn't have probably have seen him again
Hmm.
if he hadn't paid me because I really didn't like him. I probably wouldn't have. I mean, I might have been persuaded, but I don't know. Who knows, but it definitely made it be like, this is great, and I want more of that. So then this went on. Then I'd meet him in hotel rooms and stuff like that for about another couple of years, and it was very on and off. So it was like very occasional. So it was actually very insidious. It was happening quite often. It would have been overwhelming for me. I would have had to escape it or something. But this happened every couple of months, something like that.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So it was very spaced out. The texting was very intense and then gone, and then intense and then gone. And then
Mm.
I would want to text him because I wanted that attention again.
Mhm.
And I wanted my sexuality to feel valuable again. It was like
Well,
being
and it's funny because you're describing the dynamic of people in relationship with narcissists, where we call it push pull, or you know this as a therapist. The push pull or the withholding to create the desire to come. It's almost creates an addictive type of behavior. The
yeah, it was
codependent
like
person or the victim, if you want to call it that way. Not saying you're codependent. It's more like the victim, really. But
yeah, yeah.
that, and he may have had other women as well. He's probably doing this with, I would think, more than one person. So he would probably alternate between sources of supply for him.
Yeah, and that
Who
it
knows?
was
That's just a guess, but
yeah, but like what you said is exactly how it felt. It was like it like feeling like an addiction, like, oh, I need a hit of
a hit of attention.
yeah, for me
Yeah,
to feel like my sexuality is worth something.
yeah,
And yeah, that's really
yeah.
what it was like for me.
We,
And
we can compare it to modern, if you're listening and you're a younger person today, just think of likes on your Facebook or Instagram feed. Okay. It's like that. Getting a
yeah,
like. Because it literally produces dopamine in your brain.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
So I'm thinking, so here's the stages set of I trade. It's the stage is set for some sort of transactional
yeah,
a transactional exchange where my body is the commodity, but it's smoothed over by the fact that I can get money from it,
yeah.
mixed in with the push pull, mixed in with unmet needs for attention and validation, mixed in with excitement, mixed in with
Yeah,
shame,
it was
disgust,
exciting. It
all
was
of it.
exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was something exciting. It was kind of a thrill, to have this secret thing that I was doing,
Mhm.
and it felt sexy, to him. Um, yeah, and then the photos started then eventually, but the thing I was just as you were speaking about the transactional piece, because he was paying me, that set up the dynamic of I had to do what he wanted.
There it is right there. There's
Yeah,
the dynamic. You do this, I pay you.
yeah,
Right.
and it was implicit because he never said, I'm paying you to do this. He would leave the money. The pocket money thing happened the first time with him saying that, and then from then on we met in hotel rooms, and he would leave it on top of the uniform, the school uniform, in the bathroom of whatever hotel or whatever we were in, and I would just squirrel it away, and it was not spoken about. Um, but he did refer to pocket money every now and then. was so gross even using that term, you know.
Well, because it's like giving a kid something you tell a child, like giving them an allowance or something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Did you engage in actual sexual behaviors with him, or was it just dressing, posing, and photographing?
yeah, and he would hit me. Excuse me. He would
Oh,
hit me.
he would hit you.
Yeah, that was his whole buzz. Um, and the photo taking was super strange because I was very uncomfortable with it. And he had it set up. He had a whole this. I don't remember when this started, or how soon, but it was just suddenly a thing where I came in to the hotel room and there was like a whole thing, like a camera on a tripod and a lead, so that he could be like doing stuff to me and then take photos of himself also involved in the situation.
Was
Um,
he clothed all the time? And he was clothed, and you would be in a out uniform or outfit of some kind that he would
I'd
be.
be in the uniform or just not wearing anything. He would take off my clothes gradually.
Oh, okay.
Hmm. Yeah, his whole thing was like humiliating, dominating, etc., etc.
It sounds very much about control and power. Well, that is what rape is about, isn't it?
That's
Power,
exactly what his thing was.
not about sex.
It was all about power and control.
Yeah.
He did try to sex me towards the end or suggest that, but
Okay.
and that was the end. Um, but the photo thing was very difficult. But I would hate it because the flash would happen, and or the click maybe would happen. Is what I can't remember which, and I would just I felt like I was see through, and I'd always have to be faced away, so I wouldn't have my face in the photos. Um, but I remember like it was wordless, like the awareness that I can't say no to this. It
Hmm.
was like it was as soon as the money was a thing, it set up a dynamic that I internalized as opposed to it being some sort of contract both signed and we were both overtly talking about and aware of. It was like implicit, is that the right way of explaining it? Like it just absorbed into me, you have to do what he wants because you've got to just endure this photo thing because he's paying you. So and I didn't think about it, it was just in me. So I just had to endure that. One time I caught him hiding a video camera on a low down shelf in a hotel room. And because it was something about him hiding it that made me go, no.
Hmm.
And all I could say was like, no.
Ah.
Yeah, all I could say was the word no. I came out of the bathroom and he was hiding it. And then he pulled me onto his lap and like tried to, I don't really remember what happened then, but I don't think he recorded me. He might have done other times. I don't remember. I don't know. Like he could have hidden anytime, hidden a camera anytime.
Sure.
It was this big giant, video camera. Um, but I don't remember. I remember sitting on his lap. It was so awful. Um, I don't remember what happened then, but I don't think he recorded me. But that was the only time I was like, no. And I think it was to do with him hiding it, that I caught him hiding it, the dishonesty of it. There was just something in that changed things for me. Um, that went on. I grew in my dislike of him. He sent me to a friend of his who was an older man, and that was a really terrible experience. And because it was set up in a this guy wants to see you, he'll pay you as well, kind of thing, or he'll give you pocket money as well.
Okay.
It was like a job I was doing.
Right.
The other guy, I call him, what do I call him? Jay in the book. He was also becoming a job, but this was different. This was like you're going there for this amount of time, for this amount of money. He's gonna do the same stuff. And I was like, okay. So I went to this hotel. This old man answered the door, and it was just appalling. Like he made me wear this like awful like outfit. He sexually assaulted me. There was no like, is that okay? Or is it okay
Hmm.
to do that? He just did whatever he wanted. It was very painful. Um, he hit me with the belt over the top, like it was crazy. I remember not being able to breathe. I was in so much pain. I remember like holding the bedclothes really tightly because I was in so much pain. But again, because he was paying me, I was just like, I have to do what he wants. I have to just endure this. And I was already really good at enduring. Um, that was like that's like my freeze and endure is like my go-to trauma response,
Well, it's a survival skill, I suppose, right?
Yeah, survival response,
Mhm.
exactly. And then he put me in a position on the bed and I heard him doing stuff with his clothes, and the whole time I was like, he's gonna have sex with me, this is what's gonna happen. Every time he took his belt off or something, I was like, okay, it's gonna happen now, like get ready. And then it never happened. And then at the end I heard a rustle, and he put me facing away from him on the bed and like positioned me and everything. And I was like, it's gonna happen now. And then he was just having a wank, and I could hear it, and I was just in this horrific position, like waiting for it. It was just so humiliating, waiting for him to be done wanking. And then he gave me money, and he said he was all happy with himself, and he said he'd buy me more stuff to wear next time or something. And I just got out of there. But in that moment of being on the bed was really when something changed for me. I think it was like when something sort of clicked inside me, like instead of like, this is too much for me to take, because he really hurt me, like it was a really bad experience and really traumatic. Instead of something clicking like, this is really bad, you need to get out of the situation, instead it was like, oh, you're able to do this, clicked inside me, like you're able to endure this, like something like that clicked. Then the other guy, that carried on.
And Mia, is that in hindsight you realize this, or did you know in the moment?
Oh, in hindsight.
In hindsight, okay.
In hindsight, yeah, for sure. I reckon,
Right.
because that was like going to do a job, as opposed to the other guy, the younger guy, where it was like wasn't a relationship of any kind, but it was a relationship, and that we were in ongoing communication and stuff. Yeah. So then eventually I was about 20 and I was in college, and I think my confidence was growing and I was making friends, and I didn't have such a need for his attention. I really didn't like him. I'd cancel on him a lot and stuff like that. I'd like wake up in the morning and think, no, I don't want to.
Right.
I don't want to see him. And he would become furious, like, because he would have paid for a hotel or something like that. Do you know what I mean? He'd take unpaid days off work, you know? And
Right.
do you know what I mean? And then I'm just canceling. So I don't know why he'd take a full day off work, but anyway. And then he'd text me like fuming at me and stuff like that. And he came over to my house one day when I did I canceled on him again.
Oh, he knew where you lived?
Yeah, he picked me up once from
Oh,
the street. So I think he must have, I must have given him my address at some point, because I remember one time he picked me up. And even that, I remember now, like how disconnected I was, because I remember being in the car and being very uncomfortable being so close to him, even though this was somebody who like molested me and stuff. I was squashed against the passenger seat, just looking out the window. I would not look at him. I wouldn't get comfortable in the seat. I was just pressed against the door. And now I'm looking back, I'm glad you were so disconnected that you weren't able to connect. You don't want to do this. You weren't able to connect with that part of me that was like, I don't want to do this, because the other part of me was like, you have to do this because he's paying you. You have to do what he says. Was so much stronger. But when he called over to the house, my housemate answered the door, and she came in and she said, there's some angry guy outside. And I nearly died, obviously. And I went out to him and he grabbed my wrist and was giving out to me. And I just was absolutely in shock and just stood there and took his abuse. And what happened for me in that moment was him inserting himself in my kind of real life, you know, with my house and my house and whatnot. So I never saw him again after that.
oh, okay.
Yeah, that was it, because I was something. I mean, I don't remember thinking about it. I just remember knowing it's too far now. He sent me a long email explaining how he wanted to have sex with me. He used to send me these emails explaining how it was going to go when we met. And in one of them he said, and then at the end I have sex with you or something. It was a very dramatic kind of way of writing it. I can't really remember. And I was just like, absolutely not. There was something, like, it's weird, but there was something where I was like, no sex. Sex is not going to happen with him. He's not going to have sex with me. And that in combination with him basically coming into my house was like, get rid of him. So that was the end of him. But then it continued on, because I still had this like traumatized part of me that needed to feel like it was worth something. And because there was a bit of a crossover as well. I can't remember how it worked, but I don't know how I researched escorting, or like, we didn't even have Wi-Fi in the house. You know, I don't know how I did this. It's a real mystery to me. We didn't have smartphones or anything. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how.
Well, I had internet, so maybe it just went all right.
Yeah, I really don't remember. But I did know what prostitution was, and I lived near a red light area. in Dublin, where women, you see women on the street and stuff, and punters would like, how we call Johns in Ireland, they would slow down. As when I'd be walking home from work or something, they'd slow down and have a look at you and realize you're just walking home from work and then drive off. It was such a horrible experience to have. One time I was walking home from work, and this carload of like young lads were like shouting out the window how much at me. Like stuff like that would happen on that street, like just down the road from where I live.
How did you, I mean, I think I know the answer, but how did that make you feel in that moment?
Oh, I'm so angry. Oh, well, I thought they were asking me the time. I was listening to my iPod, and couldn't hear them, and it was the middle of winter, and I was wearing a hat and everything. And I was like, what do you mean? How much? Like, I didn't understand. And then I realized, and I was so angry. I was so angry.
The anger of realizing you weren't actually being seen as a human being in that moment, as a commodity or an object.
Yeah. And I remember thinking about, yeah, exactly. And thinking about how the women who were on those streets, how they would be treated by those boys, because they were boys. And I went over to the car. I was so angry. I was going to rip off one of their windscreen wipers, but the light went green and they fucked off. And I was like, fuck's sake. But that happened. But yeah, no, I knew what prostitution was and whatnot, but I wouldn't have gone on the street. You know, that wasn't the buzz that was going on for me. Either way, I ended up putting an ad on this on an escort website. There's a few of them, and yeah, putting my number on. I remember nothing about doing that. I don't remember.
You don't?
I remember nothing about writing my ad or researching, Googling, having a look. I don't remember anything about it whatsoever. It's really weird. I don't remember the first punter. I do remember one day getting a lot of phone calls, like lots and lots and lots and lots of phone calls. I remember that. And being very freaked out in college, but also a bit of a thrill. And also, that's exciting. And I'm going to get all this money, and that's great. You know, and also that's a bit scary, but also that's great, you know, this kind of thing. Yeah. And part of me wanted it and part of me was freaked out by it.
So how old are you now? Like so like we started the story at sort of 15, 16, you're in college, or you kind of 19, 18 now?
I was 19 when I sold the old man. And then I was 20, 21 when the escorting started.
Did you see him again, by the way? The old guy that beat you? No. Okay.
No.
So do you remember the thought process of okay, I've already sort of done this, so maybe I can sort of do this on my own terms, like I'll place the ad and I'll decide who I do this with, or like, was it that kind of kind of thing? Like, I don't want to be at anyone's beck and call anymore. I'm going to be my own boss, so to speak. Of course, that's not how it turns out, of course, but is that the thinking?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Was like, and I don't remember thinking this, but like looking back, I'm like, well, that was what was going on. That I was like, I'm going to be in charge. I get to set the terms and conditions. It felt powerful. It felt like I was in charge. And you know what? I was in charge of what went on with my body, as opposed to this fucker being in charge of or any of the old man or whatever being in charge of what I got to decide where and when and how long and how much. And I get to have ownership over my sexuality and what happens to it. And this seemed like a great way of doing that, right? As opposed to, I don't know how else you might do that. I don't know, but yeah. And also the money part was important for me, that I felt the money for me was literally tangible evidence of my sexuality having value. It was tangible evidence of it. So I was holding it.
Yeah, it's interesting how you say that, my sexuality having value, not me. No, or is it the same as saying me having value, or is it different?
No, it's the same. I think sexuality is such a intrinsic part of who we are. Of course, it was me, right? It was me, I having worth. Yeah, exactly. For some reason, it feels more painful to say that than having it cordoned off as like my sexuality having worth. It's like, yeah, no, but when you really dig into it, it was just that, like, it was a lie. It was, this is tangible evidence that you have worth, you have value. Yeah, that's what it was. So the money was important to me, that I kept getting that. So this is why the sex trade is so fully populated, not fully, but so populated with women who have trauma, sexual trauma already from childhood or whatever. You know, they've had prior experiences of abuse,
Would
etc.
you say all or almost all of them that's the case?
Would I say?
Hmm.
I don't know, but studies show us that it's like majority. A
Yeah,
majority.
I believe studies show somewhere around 80 to 90% of
Yeah.
sexual trauma.
Yeah, it's unsurprising to me.
Mhm.
Makes sense. This is like the perfect place to and this isn't blaming the women at all, but it's like because obviously it's complicated and there's other factors going on. If I had other sources of like self-worth that were as explicit coming at me, um, maybe that wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? But I'm not in any way blaming myself or other women for how they end up in the sex trade, because it's just how it happens, and the men are the ones feeling the whole thing. So obviously it's all on them.
At the end of the day, I'm going to say to the man, with you create the demand.
Oh,
There's
it's
no
all
sex trade without you creating the demand for it.
no, it's like
And,
blaming people who are in poverty for being in poverty. Do you know what I mean? Like
mhm.
it's irrelevant. It's not their fault. Um, yeah, so the money was the thing. So I don't remember the first punter or anything like that, which is mad, because a lot of my
You
friends
don't remember the first, eh?
no,
Okay.
a lot of my friends who've been involved in sex trade, they all remember the first punter, and they could describe him and like talk about the whole thing. I'm like, I have no idea. I can't remember anything about it. Nothing, not a single thing. And it really kind of gets to me that I can't remember that. But I a lot of time, like there's a lot of chunks I can't remember. Like that whole setting. I think it's too hard for me to remember setting up the ad and doing all that stuff. I think it's too hard because I did it. I did it to me. You know, I know why and I understand why and I have compassion for myself, but it's still hard. It needs more compassion, clearly, like that I did it to me, you know, that I harmed myself in that way, or that I put myself in a position where men who were harmful could harm me. Um, Again, I'm not blaming myself at all, but it's a hard one.
Sounds like you had to wrestle with that a feeling of bringing this on yourself. In your healing, it sounds like that's
Like you do that
something you
anyway
had to
when you're
work
in
through.
person. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm just saying that that sounds like it's something you've worked through or have had to work through as part of your
Yeah,
processing of
still,
this.
still working through it.
Mhm.
Yeah. But then the sex trade went on then for about 4 years, but it was on and off as well. It was like whenever I needed money, or if I needed, felt like it, or if I needed that hit, you know, of self-worth hit, feeling wanted, feeling desired, or sexually valued, you know, I would do it. And um yeah.
Yeah. So just for people that aren't aware, there's sort of different ways that prostitution happens. So one is the girls that walk the streets, street prostitutes, and they all mostly have pimps that take most of their money and control them. And then there's also escorting, which would be an in call or an out call. So there's companies that escort companies that I know in Toronto will buy condos and own a condo, and then the girls will book appointments in the condo for the punters to come and meet. And you did a lot of what you call out calls, like maybe it's a different term there, but that's where you basically could go to the punter's house. Maybe he rents a motel room, but you would. So what's involved is they respond to the ad. You set up a time and a place, and then you go meet them there. And then when you're done, you leave. So that was kind of what happened with
That's
you?
mostly what happened with me. Yeah, they'd be in hotel rooms or in less often to their own homes, but sometimes, but mostly it was hotel rooms.
Uh-huh.
One guy was the back of his van. He'd pick me up. Yeah, he'd pick me up. He was actually a very nice guy. um,
For
um,
John, you mean, right?
huh?
Nice guy for a John, you mean?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It's so strange because I'm very like I'm a very compassionate kind of person, and I like connecting with people, and I see their humanity, you know. And with that guy, like I just he was a nice guy. He was funny and he was kind, and he was doing what he was doing. You know, it's so complex, so complex. And then there were ones that were like one guy in the book that overtly, not that guy you were read out, that was the very last one, but one guy in this house, it's a very big house in the suburbs, and he was not a nice person, like, there's just, it's like the whole, if you meet the whole spectrum of humanity. And because I didn't realize that what was going on was really bad for me, harmful for me, and like I wasn't seeing it, like it's like being mugged by somebody who's very friendly, but you're still getting mugged, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, well, this is
Like,
a good time maybe to read it if you're okay. I want to read some of the descriptions of these sex buyers. And I'm going to start on page 24 if you want. I know you have the book there, but is that a good time to do that now?
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm going to start on page 24 with the chirpy guy. So you go the whole way to Swords. So this is you doing an out call. I imagine Swords with the capital S is a area of town,
Yeah,
subdivision or something. Yeah.
the place. Yeah.
You see a chirpy guy in his 30s who blabbers on about his girlfriend being away for the weekend with her friends. So he's cheating on his girlfriend. How she knows about his addiction to prostitutes, but thinks it's all over now. She took him back, trusted him again. Tall and fit with stubble on his face and glinting mischievous eyes. You perch on the side of the bed, and here he is telling me all about it, dick in hand. He's yapping as if he's discussing the weather or his plans for the weekend. He says he's more careful now. He sees his escorts only on a lunch break or when his girlfriend is away, like now. He's really funny. You like him despite his apparent lack of conscience. By the way, people that show no empathy or a sense of conscience, clinically we refer to as sociopaths. They're incapable of empathy. And I don't know if we will have a chance to talk about this, but I think you say somewhere like you didn't generally tend to, the men that you met, you didn't think were sociopaths and narcissists. But anyway, maybe we could come back to that. The ability of men, I agree with this because I see this every day in my practice. The ability of men to lie to their partners is amazing. It's not like an affair with feelings, they say. And this is, I've heard from clients, a justification for paying for sex is it's not an affair, it doesn't mean anything, like this, as if that makes it okay, right? I don't love her, I'm not going to leave you for her. They know what they have is precious, they just don't respect it. This thing they do is so woven into their lives that lying has become natural. Telling their wives they'll be home at 8 instead of 7. So easy to say it again and again. You don't really care, it's none of your business. He fucks you hard in the spare room so fast you can't breathe and you go home at 250 euro. You're visited by this young guy in his late 20s who gives out about his girlfriend the entire time. He's short and weedy and wears hoodies and runners. He talks nonstop and it's draining because part of the job is to be present to the punter. He's too interested, he asks questions. Why are you doing this? Most of the girls are foreign. What got you into it? You don't want to answer these questions, right? You just want to get in and get out. He looks around the room and picks up things. You feel exposed and you're annoyed. Why should it matter? Why should that have any impact on you? You go to an empty apartment where an electrician wants a call out on his lunch break. So here's a guy at work, literally on his lunch break.
Oh yeah, that was
calling
very
an escort in.
That was the lunchtime thing was very common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he fucks you beside the mirrored wardrobe, so you're confronted with yourself the whole time. You can't remember anything about him. A man in his early 50s rents you for an hour. Such an interesting phrase, isn't it? Rents you. That's it.
Yeah.
Rents you. Tall, skinny, big nose, reddish face, tiny eyes. He sits on the side of the bed and 3 notes slide out of his hand on the floor. You both look at them. He waits for you to pick him up. He lies back and unbuckles his belt in preparation for a blowjob, and the humiliation of the moment is complete. You visit men in hotel rooms all over Dublin. You're cheerful and caring. A breath of fresh air, says one 50-year-old man. So obedient, says another, and your stomach shrinks. Most of them are middle-aged, middle class, married, and wealthy. They live in nice houses, have big cars, and fat walls with pictures of their families. Seeing you as a hobby, they feel entitled to indulge. And entitlement is huge. It's so huge, and a lot of guys I work with, and they're not even aware of how massive their sense of entitlement is. It takes a lot of work and it's time to
Yeah.
make a dent in that actually. They express no emotion. They like to try new girls. They say they want to try you and you feel grateful. Interesting. You feel grateful you've been selected. You actually feel special that they picked you. It's kind of sort of like those mixed feelings that you talked about, right? It's like I'm disgusted and grateful at the same time. You feel special that you're able to sell sex, that you have the guts and confidence to do it. And it's almost like at this point, there's sort of is there like a pride in yourself of what you can actually put up with because you're
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah,
How
totally.
tough I am.
Yeah, I can do this, and I can own being the sexual object, and that's cool that I can do that. But
Mm.
like nobody knew apart from me what was going on. So nobody, it wasn't like, it was just for me, this feeling of like I can endure this, and it's really cool that I'm okay with being the sexual object for men, and I can be whatever they want me to be.
I want to read one more quote, me on page 28, 29. You see a man in his 60s. He's rented you as a birthday present to himself. Doesn't occur to you that it's weird a man 40 years older than you wants to have sex with you. He's big, tall, straight up with white hair. He wears a waistcoat. Pays you 500 euro for 2 hours and you like him a lot. He's respectful and gentle. You expected it might be hard because earlier in the day he sent you a text message specifying how you should have your hair tied up. But it turns out he's kind, it doesn't even penetrate you. You never even see his penis and feel grateful, but you cannot yet reflect on why that might be. And my question was, you like him a lot.
Yeah.
And when you read that now, like what's that? Is that a trauma response? Like I'm gonna act like I like you, so this goes well. Is it that I'm conditioned to present it? Is this the mask you talked about? The mask of I like you.
No, I think
What
it
is
was
that?
genuine. I think it was genuine.
Hmm.
He was kind and he was very gentle and very respectful, like as far as you can be when you're doing that. Um, it's like again being mugged by a very polite mugger, you know.
It sounds like compartmentalization to me. Maybe that's wrong, but like there's okay, we're here to do this transaction, and over here, you're kind of a nice guy. If I met you in any other situation, I would find that you are a nice man. So you're holding the two realities together and aware of them both at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, because neither of us saw what was going on as being bad or harmful. Um, and he was constantly concerned about whether I was okay with what he was doing.
So that was different, maybe.
Yeah, it was
Was
very,
was that the thing that
it was very
brought
different.
up I kind of like you because you actually seem like you care, despite this is a transactional.
This
Uh,
is like how low my self worth was. That like a punter being
not terrible to you made him
not terrible,
likable.
not forceful or pushy or power trippy or bossy or non-verbal, which some of them just wouldn't even speak to you. Um, he was really involved. He was really like, is that okay? What do you think? We don't have to do that. Like, because his whole thing was he didn't have sex with me, but he like did things to me, with different objects. And his whole thing was like, or during the when he was doing that, he was like, is that okay? Just let me know if that's too much. We don't have to do that. Like he was kind of like a granddad vibe.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in his 60s. I mean, that's gross. I was like, whatever age I was, he was like 40 years older than me. It's gross
Yeah.
now when I look back. I'm like, that's absolutely disgusting.
Mhm.
But like, there was, like, I was just always meeting them where they were. Do you know? I was just always like open and kind and understanding. And you could tell that I was unusual. I could tell by how they responded to me that I was kind of a little bit different, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Obviously, it's gross that he was renting a 21-year-old when he was in his 60s, or whatever age I was. But I do remember how gentle he was. but it's so complicated because that doesn't say that what he did was okay, or that there's some good punters or bad punters. They're all doing the bad thing. Like they're all harming me, and that harmed me too. I really wanted with these stories to show the complexity of the
Mm.
different kinds of men and how I felt about that.
Well,
And
that's right.
how it's
So I wanted to kind of just touch on that because that jumped out at me, you know,
yeah.
because the narrative I would expect, and you know, I heard some things similar with Andrea in our discussions. I think you've listened to some of that interview, and she says similar types of things. Like some of the guys come in and they like really weren't that bad. They were kind of nice guys, right?
They were, yeah.
But not nice really. But
Yeah.
it's that complexity of the yeah. I see it as a way. I don't know. I see it as a compartmentalization of everything and a way to get through it, but
Yeah.
also the fact that it's not all completely horrifying from the first moment to the end of an unending tirade of verbal and physical pain and abuse. That's not what it is. Sometimes, probably, sure, but sometimes it's not. So what's that mean? I don't know. I don't know what that means, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a part of the book I really struggled with was writing about the punters because I wanted to be honest, right, about all the different types of men, how I felt about them all. I really wanted to put in the ones that I liked, you know, that I was like, they're nice people. But nice people, but you know what I mean. They didn't harm me. They were respectful towards me. But like, think about that in the context of feminism or gender equality in general. Like, quite often we take the bare minimum effort from men and go, oh my God, they're amazing. They did this bare minimum thing.
It's kind of like that. That's what it feels like.
That's what it feels like a little bit. I was like,
yeah.
I was always surprised if anybody treated me really well. In general, I'd be really like, oh my God, that's amazing, you know. And it was kind of a little bit like this, where, like, I give people, men especially, too much credit for the bare minimum. So when I was back there, I still do that like now, but when I was back there, that would have been enormously the case, where I would have been fawning at the ones that were like friendly, chatty, respectful, asking if this is okay, or if that's okay. That was very rare. Like, it was very rare to have a man ask me, is that okay? Like, is that right?
Yeah.
Like, didn't happen really.
Yeah.
So it was like, I don't know, maybe a handful of men would have been ones where I was like, that chirpy guy. I think you're right about him being sociopathic. He was just he was so entertaining, you know, charming. The idea of a charming criminal came to mind just a moment ago, of that thing of like, you can like aspects of someone, how charming they are, how funny they are, how entertaining they are, and they're also a sociopath, and they're also a criminal, and they're also doing all this. They're also killing people or whatever they're doing, you know, and they're funny and they're charming, and it's also complex. It doesn't make what they're doing okay, because people are never one thing. Punters are not all evil, right? A lot of them are psychopaths, sure, narcissists, you know, sociopaths.
Well, I don't think I've run into a sex buyer, like as a client, that I would think it was a sociopath.
Right. Yeah.
For sure, they're out there, but sociopaths don't come to therapy either, really. Right. I've run into a couple that were sociopaths, but not them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really complex, but it doesn't take anything away. It's not like saying, well, some of them were friendly, so that means what they were doing was okay. You know what I mean? It's just like you're saying, friendly mugger, you're still getting mugged.
Friendly mugger. I like your analogy. Friendly. Yeah. Excuse me, ma'am, if it's not too much trouble, as he holds the gun on you, would you mind handing over your purse, wallet, and credit cards? Because I would really hate to have to shoot you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I can actually see that in Britain, because with my wife and I laugh when we're watching Downton Abbey or something set in Britain, and they're really mad at each other, but they're so polite. They have such good manners even when they're fighting. Well, at least some of the shows that I see on TV anyway. We look at each other and go, I love when the British argue. They're just so polite all the time.
Yeah. But like, it is a good analogy, isn't it? Because you might not be you might not come away from that mugging. You're still probably going to be traumatized by it and end up being very scared because you've been massively violated, in a different way to somebody grabbing you, taking your stuff, which has happened to me, and whatever. That's a different kind of response. But either way, the person is committing a crime, right? Right. So it doesn't mean it's okay what they're doing. It just, maybe the response might be different. Like, I don't look back at the experience of that guy and feel like it's not a horrifying memory when I bring them up in my mind. I'm not like, oh God, I want to get them out. You know, with most of them, I'm like, oh, I want to get them out of my mind. With him, it doesn't. But the main thing about that was that he didn't have sex with me. If he'd had sex with me, I think I would have looked back on that experience very differently. Really, because he was 60 something, 60 odd. And even whatever age he was, it would have been gross. But like, things would have, I don't think it would have been so, it would have been different.
Yeah, that's a question that came to mind because I hear pro-sex workers that ideologies will make the argument that being an escort, let's say, is empowering in a way to feel empowered in your sexuality. But I'm hearing you say, like, you didn't really say no. Like, were you truly empowered in the sense like, okay, I show up at 12 o'clock in the apartment, you're paying me €200, and you're going to ask me for what you want to do, and then I'm going to say yes or no to a certain set of things. That's not how it is it? Right.
No, you might have a pre-agreement of, like, they might ring you up and say, like, do you do oral without, which is like oral without a condom.
Yeah.
So I would say yes or no to that, or they might say, do you do anal, something like that. Sometimes they might ask you a few things, but or I want this or I want that, but usually they just want to have sex, a blowjob and sex. That's usually what it is. So there is no question about your boundaries really at all. They certainly don't care about your boundaries. They're not asking you, like, what are you okay with or not okay with? Like, that's the point. The point of paying is that they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to care about your boundaries because they're paying you not to have any kind of thing. I don't think I ever said no, apart from that Last Punter. I don't remember ever saying no, because my job was to do what they wanted. That was the job. It's like me going into the therapy room now and the client comes and me going, I actually don't feel like doing this now. Like,
I don't want to listen to you talk about your problems.
Yeah, I'm not in the mood.
I'm not up to it today.
Give me the money. Give me the money, but I'll, see you next week. Like, you just, obviously you're not going to do that, right?
I want to read from the 34 to 35 because this is such a great explanation. It goes to the point that we we're just talking about. And it starts on the last page of 34. During sex. So I want the people and for, there's clients in the general public and also professionals and therapists that watch these videos. And for people that think that have bought into the narrative that this is an empowering way of women to express their sexual autonomy, I want you to listen to this. Mia's own words from her own experience. During sex, you are at the mercy of the punter to have sex the way he wants. If he says turn around, you turn around. If he pushes you down for a blowjob, you give him a blowjob. They squeeze your throat, they pull your hair. All of it happens so fast, there's no room for consideration of how you feel. How can you negotiate consent for something that is already happening, has already happened? And you tell a story of, it's the understanding going in with the punter is you wear a condom, and then he tries to penetrate you with no condom. You pull back, you tell him to put a condom on, and he just like stares at you blankly and continually tries to penetrate you like 3 or 4 times. And you keep saying, no, condom, no, condom. And he just looks at you and just keeps trying to do it. And then in the end, I think he just wanks off of anyways or something. But
yeah,
right. So just because these people aren't trustworthy, and just because he says, oh yeah, wear a condom, that in no way means that he'll keep his word and wear a condom. So back to the quote, how can you negotiate consent when you've been paid to do the exact thing you would like to negotiate your way out of? Wow. I want to read that again. How can you negotiate consent when you've been paid to do the exact thing you would like to negotiate your way out of? When it comes to penetration, there's little you can do to physically maintain control. how deep, how fast, it's up to the man. They don't consider what's okay for you. It's like caring that the waitress in the cafe enjoys serving the coffee. One man leans hard on your chest and you can't breathe. He says things into your ear while crushing you. In the calmest voice you have, you ask him to move. This is the reality of paid for sex. It's not having actual sexual escapades in which both of you joyfully unravel your sexuality. It's about getting fucked for money and pretending that everything's fine. It reminds me of, I don't know if you watched Andrea's first interview, but she talks about going into the brothel and she naively thought like, oh, we do blowjobs and hand jobs. And she said to the madam, like, so this is where guys come for their blowjobs. And the woman that ran the brothel said, no, we fuck for money. Like just straight up, right? That's what we do. There were nice punters, and you put that in quotes. So, and we just talked about that for like 10 minutes. So there's that, there's that dissonance of you're kind of like a nice guy in quotes, and at the same time paying me to rent my body. Beyond the violence of penetrating you for money, which is, let's say, sexual violence, most weren't violent. Many were a laugh and you hung around them. It didn't make sense. It didn't make what they did okay. And actually, it made it worse. The betrayal sharper. It wasn't sex. I really like this part. It wasn't sex. Okay, so when men pay women to have access to their body for sex, let's stop saying sex. Sex is voluntary and sexual consent is flexible and reversible. Sex is freely given. So if you're a woman listening to this and you're wondering what consent is, listen to Mia. Sex is freely given and freely expressed. It is not something you have to strategize or get through or get over with. Not something you have to do to get something. Not something that traumatizes. Prostitution, sex is not sex. Sex is mutual communication between two people. Sex is something that people create together. What men are paying for is not sex, but the use of a woman's body. They are paying their way around sexual consent, paying for the concept of consent. The sex trade is compensated sexual violation. And then you go on, there's so much more good stuff. Please buy the book, it's so well written. But do you want to comment on that? Or, I mean, I think you just, that's beautifully said, but.
Yeah, I think it annoys me as well, talking about paying for sex annoys me. For the reasons you were saying, it's not actually sex that the men are paying for, it's because it isn't sex. It just isn't sex. Because consent is rendered void completely by the fact you're being paid to acquiesce, to comply, and so on. So without mutuality, you may as well be a blow-up doll. You know, you're giving access to your body for the man to use however he wants, but you're not in it. You're not mutual. You're not desiring him. You're not like, this is great. Like, maybe by some fluke you are, whatever, sometimes, but like, I highly doubt it. But it's like, yeah, your body's just an object. Like, your body's an object for them to use, and that's exactly how it feels, and that's why it's so harmful, and that's why it's so traumatizing and dehumanizing and so on, because mutuality isn't there, which has to be there when we're talking about sex.
And something that I don't hear talked about a lot, and Gail Dines is the role of pornography in this. And Gail Dines, are you familiar with her? She wrote the book Pornland. Yes,
I love that book.
Yeah, she has a talk called How Porn Creates the Job, and porn is so men that watch porn, and or most of the men, if not all, that pay for sex have watched porn, and we're talking upwards into the tens of thousands of hours of porn in their lifetime. So it's rehearsed the sexual objectification and eroticization of violence again and again and again, and neurochemically reinforced through masturbation and orgasm. So a lot of men, they need, like, they're so conditioned to that they actually can't get aroused or orgasm unless it is in a situation where the violence is part of it. And like you say, paying for the sex is sexual violence. And then there's the violence on top of that. But it's been paired in their arousal system and reinforced so many times that this actually becomes their template.
Yeah.
So they're using you because you fit the template and you're interchangeable. They don't really care what you look like as long as you're, you know, sort of like okay looking, and they don't care what your name is or anything about you. You're the object that brings the reward that fits the template.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because you cannot buy sex unless you can objectify a woman.
Yeah.
Because you have to be oblivious to women as beings with a soul.
Yeah, there's a line in the book that goes something like, it comes down to this. If men, I'd have to try and find it actually. I want to get it right. But it was like, if men see women or see sex as, I'd have to find it somewhere. That's annoying because I can't remember.
Do you remember the gist of it?
Yeah, it was like if they see
Just
sex,
give me the gist of it.
it's like if men saw women, sexual relationships with women or sex with women or something like that, as based on a platform of equal respect and power, the sex trade would not exist.
Sure.
Something like that, right?
Yeah. Well, and I back to this nice guy thing. I asked Andrea if it felt, this is in the second interview I did with her, can respect actually exist in this space? And she thought about it for a second and she said, it's like a pseudo respect.
Yes.
It's like what it comes down to is the nice guys, their strategy is simply, I can get more of what I want if I put on the persona of being a nice guy.
Yeah, it's like them paying you in an envelope, putting the money in an envelope, and you know, stuff like that. That's such a good expression, that pseudo respect, because obviously what they're doing is not respectful. Obviously they're dehumanizing and objectifying you, whether they're being friendly about it or not, or asking you if whatever's going on is okay with you or not. The fact they're objectifying you sexually in the first place is obviously not respectful. So yeah, that's a really good expression. That's pseudo respect. It helped make it easier for me in the moment. Like I was saying with that old guy, like I am so grateful he didn't have sex with me, because that would be a really bad memory if he did. Yeah, I can't remember what I was going to say there. Sorry, something about him.
No, that's good. Oh, I want to read one more little section. This is 38, 39. In the media, and I considered talking to you about playing a clip from Pretty Women and then reading the reality. And so I was watching a few clips last night, and you know, Julia Roberts, I assume you've seen that movie, Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. Yeah. And you know, she's in the tub and he's like, they're laughing and joking, and he says, I want to hire you for the week. And so basically he's becoming a punter, but it's done in such a way that the language, and it's just so interesting how it's portrayed as this fun, so romantic, exciting, sexy thing, right? But there was a slip. The writer made a mistake in this when Richard Gere says, so they agree on a price, $4,000 for the week. And he says, I want you at my beck and call. And I'm like, there you go. You slipped up. You showed your true nature.
Yeah.
You narcissistic piece of shit. Like, this is what I'm thinking, right? Yeah. I want you at my beck and call. Who the hell says that?
Who do you think you are? Yeah.
Right? So if you go on a date with a guy and he says, you know, Mia, I really like you, and you know, I'd like us to spend some more time together, and I think it'd be great if you were at my beck and call.
But isn't that like kind of like the sugar baby thing? Doesn't that remind you of that?
Yeah.
Or the sugar daddy thing, should I say?
Yeah, and that's really more what he was a sugar daddy.
Yeah. Like
right.
Giving an allowance for the week, but you're actually disposable.
So anyways, it was last minute. It was last night I was doing this, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to throw that in at the last minute, you know, but go watch some of the clips from Pretty Women. And I have an interview with a guy who was a former sex buyer, no longer John, and he literally talks about how this movie shaped his ideology
Yeah.
and
And then
legitimized it.
there's the Belle de Jour TV series. It was in the UK, from a woman called herself Belle de Jour, who used to keep a blog, and then she wrote a couple of books anonymously, as far as I know. At least one anyway, called Secret Diary of a London Call Girl.
Oh,
Did you hear that? Secret Diary of a London Call Girl. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not familiar with it though.
Yeah. And then it got turned into a TV series that was like super popular, about this glamorous, escort going around having these escapades and hilarious moments and super like luxurious, like all this shit. This is like a good long time ago, like the early 2000s maybe. The amount of young women that ended up in the sex trade from that, I don't know how many that is, but it would be a lot. It absolutely glamorized the sex trade beyond belief.
It must turn your stomach, eh?
Yeah, I didn't consume it. I didn't watch it. I didn't.
Okay, well, one more quote. In the media, the men who paid for their way inside women are just, I love this, another way of describing this. The men who pay their way inside women are described by many sex trade advocates as lonely, elderly, disabled, or socially isolated poor men. They're described as men wanting to connect, in need of touching a woman's body, wanting a hug, a chat. In the 4 years I spent, quote, servicing random men, I never met any man who just wanted to talk or needed a hug, not once. The vast majority were in their 40s and 50s, middle class, self-assured, and heaving with a sense of entitlement. No crippling shyness or social anxiety. Even if 100% of punters were wheelchair-ridden, chronically lonely, altruistic philanthropists. That's a great sentence, by the way. That you strung all that together. They have no right to use a woman's body to have an orgasm. Nothing gives anyone that right. To achieve orgasm is not a right. Sex is neither a bodily need nor a right. Punters can be funny, likable, generous men. They're also lazy, emotionally immature, codependent, selfish, and misogynistic. I know this because they pay for sex. No other evidence is needed.
Right.
And just so many more great stories.
It annoys me in like about the sex trade that this thing of like, well, some men really need sex. There's like, I think a law was passed in the UK to allow carers to assist men they're looking after to access women in prostitution. I think
I've read of this.
This shit. Where are all the female women who would like to have a sexual relationship? Where are they? Where are the carers for them, helping them? Like it doesn't happen. And it really annoys me that we have this view of like, well, they need it and poor them being disabled or whatever. And it's so patronizing to the disabled community as well, that they would need to pay for sex, that they wouldn't be sexually wanted and valued in their own right as a whole human being, right? It's so patronizing to them and undignifying to them as well as a community. But I'm really sick of that kind of discourse of like, poor men, lots of them just need to talk. They want human touch, a woman's touch, all this shit. I'm like, well, then they can maybe go to a therapist and find ways of making, meaningful relationship with other people where they can touch them, or be listened to.
Or make friends.
Yeah, maybe
find a partner. And if you can't find a partner because there's problems that you have, work on yourself and fix those problems so that you become more attractive to women.
It's the usual thing of women will look after the broken pieces of men. Women will absorb men's trauma, which is what I believe that prostitution is women absorbing male trauma, right?
Wow, that's a whole, that's a really whole
I think
hour right there.
If you're a punter, there's something up with you, right? Even no matter how friendly, all the rest that we've just spoken about, whatever, which is, by the way, a handful.
Yeah.
I don't want to put too much emphasis on the funny, nice ones or whatever, because
I got you. I hear you.
You understand, right? They're few and far between. but yeah, I think if you're able to do that, if you see women in such a disconnected, dehumanizing way that you can pay them to have sex with you, okay, partially culture is supporting this, and our misogynistic patriarchal society is supporting
Let's talk about that actually as sort of a
yeah.
next talking point. What the hell is wrong with our culture and our society?
Yeah, like
What do you
it
think?
supports the men in what they do partially, because most men aren't punters, so that's important to remember. And I'm not giving them off the hook here by saying the culture supports them, but it does. We've got normalized pornography, this absolute normalization and acceptance of pornography. The whole Pornhub thing at the moment with the owners of Pornhub resigning, nobody knows about that. This isn't mainstream in the main. This is huge.
Zero coverage in the mainstream media
Yeah.
about the collapse of the largest criminal and public enterprise in the world.
Yeah. I
Zero
think
coverage.
the New Yorker did a big piece about it.
Yeah,
Um,
Nicholas Kristof, you mean his article or
I
the
think
other article that just came out?
I think I'm thinking of the one that just came out, but I'm also
Yes.
the Nicholas Kristof one.
Mm.
So like, okay, there's two, right? Yeah, and here in Ireland, like, it's just tumbleweeds. No, all the feminism in Ireland is like basically pro porn, right? It's like liberal feminism mostly. It's like pro objectification, pro OnlyFans, pro all this kind of you kind of individualistic, choice feminism kind of bullshit, which is looking after your own and not looking after like what is best for all women, even the ones you don't like, especially the marginalized ones. So the culture, of course, and how pornified our society is, of course, supports the men in normalizing that for them. This isn't just me hypothesizing randomly. And it
I
also
agree. I agree 100%.
it makes sense, right? And then it also obviously supported me because they got the message from pornography, let's say, and also just images, advertising, misogynistic messaging that we all receive from the people in our lives and the environment we grow up in, etc. They get the message when it comes to sex or women. I do things to the woman and she looks after me, right? She does what I want. Even stuff that you might think is kind of harmless, like the woman taking the man's name in marriage. It's kind of it's still a very automatic thing that happens. Like that, if we look into why that is a thing, it's because back in the day, the dad was literally giving ownership of his daughter to another man. That's where it comes from. And then still automatic. It's a very touchy subject as well, which also fascinates me. I find things where people are touchy and defensive. I'm like, there's good stuff here. Can we get into it? Like, because there's gold in here. If I know when I feel defensive about something, I'm like, there's gold in here for me to find out about me. But that's still a major normalized thing. And a lot of men get defensive about that as well, right? They want to hold on to their name and they see it as status and they see it as like, I don't know what they see it as, but they don't want to let go of their name, that's for sure. And I think that's fascinating because it's a patriarchal structure that benefits men. They get to keep their family name, etc. And that makes them feel maybe, I don't know, unconsciously important, etc., whatever. So all this stuff, it's not just sex-based stuff, all this stuff. Women being mostly the carers, or the ones that have to leave their work to raise children. They're not in positions of power. And porn is all funneling into the sense of men kind of going, well, I'm entitled to this. The thing I think about the men who pay for sex, because most don't, as we said, most men watch porn, right? But most don't pay for sex. Here in Ireland, it's 1 in 15 men. So that's about over 100,000 men in Ireland.
One in 15 men pay for sex?
Yeah, in Ireland.
In Ireland?
The most recent statistic. Yeah, that's
Wow.
the latest study. 1 in 15 men. So that works out as about 160,000 men. Compare that to the 1,000 roughly women who are selling sex. And
do you know how that ranks compared to the rest of the world? The 1 in 15?
I don't know. I think it's a lot higher in the countries.
I would guess it's higher than other countries, but I
don't know. I mean, I know it's higher in, or I would assume it's higher in countries where the sex trade is decriminalized or legalized,
like Germany.
Sense, obviously, yeah, like obviously it would make sense. I don't know what it would be, but it would be a lot. 1 in 5 or something in Germany, something gross.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm right about that or not. It just popped into my head.
Yeah.
But you've got that, and then so all of this stuff is funneling this sense of entitlement and unconscious. I don't believe for men they're not sitting around thinking about like, well, I want to feel I all this stuff is happening for me to do this. It's like an unconscious process. But there's there has to be some disconnect along the way for the men who pay for sex. And I want to know what that is, that gets them to be like, I'm going to go do this. One punter I met, I called him Sean in the book. We met towards the end of my experience of the sex trade, and he was another one of these nice guys, right? And he was a very human. He treated me like a human being, right? I think that's the difference, right? The nice guys treated me like a human being, right? Even though they were paying me for sex and dehumanized me in that way, they also treated me like a human being with thoughts and feelings, etc., and like preferences or whatever, and boundaries. So this guy had difficulty getting it up because he'd just been watching porn, and then that was fine. And then we stayed in touch, and he told me about his porn addiction and his sex addiction. And
I think I remember this story.
Yeah, I was making a radio documentary for college. I did a journalism master's, and I invited him to be interviewed and changed his voice and all the rest of it. And he was totally supportive. He was at this stage against the sex trade and wanted to help. So he trekked over from wherever he was, miles away, to the college. No fear, absolutely no like nervousness about, will I be identified? He was just like, I want to help. Did the thing, and afterwards we were talking, and he told me all about that was before, sorry, he was telling me all about how it happened for him, that he was just out one night with his friends, and somebody said, do you want to go to this apartment, a brothel? And he said, all right, yeah, I think it is the laugh, and that's how it began for him. And then he was
probably
like,
drinking, and
it was the end of the night.
Inhibitions are down, right?
Yeah, at the end of the night. And that's the thing as well. And I have a friend.
Not an excuse. I'm just saying that it plays a role.
But how the normalization, it's like a friend goes, oh, this is a normal thing to do. Let's go over there. It's a normal, let's go. And he goes, yeah, okay, it'll be a laugh. That's how it's seen, as a laugh. I have another friend who was working in Amsterdam briefly, and same thing for him. He just tagged along with his friends who wanted to go to the red light district for the laugh, and he paid for sex with a woman, and he was vehemently telling me she wasn't trafficked. And I was like, you've no idea what happened to her, if she was trafficked or not. Like, give me a break. But you see how the normalization of it, it's like that peer influence thing. Like, if everyone else is okay with it, then I'm okay with it. Then I'm more okay with it than if.
Here's a story. And can I share a story of a client? True story. Yeah. Because this is the point of like, where's the disconnect, right? So he grows up in, not in Canada, another country, and sees from a young age the affairs of his father, the misogyny, and the way he treats his mother, and the porn. And his dad gives him a project to do when he's a teenager, to go watch all his porn videos, and then edit the parts together that are the best, so that he can make a greatest hits sort of thing, and do that for his dad. It's like a little project his dad gave him, right? Oh, it gets better. And then guess what he gets for his 16th birthday? Trip to the prostitute. Oh no, the videos are always there. Porn is just like picking up a newspaper, a Time magazine, right? So he gets a trip to the brothel to make a man of, right? So guess what he grows up doing?
Yeah.
Watching porn and paying for sex. What a shock, right? Did the guy even have a chance? And you can say, well, he could have seen how that is obviously wrong. And yeah, fair enough. But those are formative experiences that are very powerful, and took him many, many years. And as far as I know, he's clean and sober from that. I work, but I had to do a lot of work with him. And I lost touch with him. I think he moved back to his home country. But anyway, there's just an explanation.
Yeah,
no excuse, but an explanation. It's an explanation.
But it's an explanation, absolutely. It's like, you can see how trauma begets trauma, and that guy was so traumatized when he was young by what
generationally
watching his dad doing this, treating his mom like this, let alone the porn paying, and then his dad bringing him to the brothel. Like, what a kind of male role model for that guy. Makes absolute sense they ended up replicating that.
Jill, if you have a chance to watch Jill Martin on my channel, she talks about her dad coming home on a Saturday and just saying, oh, I just got back from the brothel and had sex. And this is him telling his wife and kids. that, oh, I just spent the morning at the brothel and ha ha ha, whatever. And I don't know if she had a brother or not, but if she did, I think she had siblings. What's the messaging
Yeah.
to the boy? I mean, all boys want to grow up and be like their dad because their dads are great, and that's their role model, right?
Yeah.
So this would be, a radical feminist would say, there's the patriarchy, there's the structural, generational, patriarchal system that perpetuates this misogyny. I would think that's what they would say. And they make a good point. Like, I don't agree with a lot of rad femmes on a lot of things, but dang, they make some good points sometimes. They really do about that kind of stuff. And I don't think all of the evils in the world are explained simply by going, beating the drum of patriarchy and misogyny. I think it's maybe more nuanced than that, but they really do make some good points, right? And sorry, anyway, I didn't mean to cut off your train of thought, but it just jogged some stories in my mind. But
God, that's a really sad story.
yeah, and I really do have compassion for these guys, because the narrative of all sex buyers are sociopathic pigs is just simply not true.
No, they're human beings. Yeah,
It's just not true. Yeah,
it's not true. But that's why things like our law, I think, just as you were speaking, is so important, because
what do you think? Yeah, what do you think? What's an approach we should do? Like, I think the Nordic model is great. I think we should criminalize buyers. But what's your take? Yeah, on that.
Yeah, I agree with you. We have the Nordic model here in Ireland as well. So what it
You
does
do
is,
have the Nordic model?
yeah. I
Well,
can.
how is 1 out of 5 guys getting away with paying for sex?
Yeah. We've had it for 5 years, since 2017.
Same in Canada, but no one enforces it here.
Yeah, it's a slow moving thing here as well. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it's not being enforced as much as it could be, as far as I know, as far as I've heard from people I know who do know about these things. I think it's one of the reasons I think it's a very important law is that it sends the message of it isn't okay to do this. So if it does something to halt that trauma begetting trauma thing, like that client of yours you were speaking about. Even if you get the dad doing that to you, which is just horrifically painful. To even hear that was so hard, that story. But yeah, it was very painful to hear that story, what that kid had to witness. And
I guess I've sat with it for so many years, but I think the first time me hearing it too, it did make me very sad.
Yeah, it's sad. Yeah, it's sad.
Mm.
It's really sad. So the thing about the Nordic model is that it's telling us it's a criminal offense to pay for sex. It's not okay to pay for sex. We don't accept it in our society as an okay thing. In the same way, we don't accept rape or sexual assault or sexual harassment or anything else. It's part of that, and we don't accept it. So it sends a message to the punters that it isn't okay. So if we had the Nordic model back in the day when I was involved in the sex trade, I would have also received that message. Paying for sex isn't okay. Hope they would have known about it. And that might have done something for me. It might have told me, hey, like,
Think so?
I hope so. I'd hope so. I don't know. But they might have sent me the message of, instead of it just being like, because that law wasn't there when I was involved in the sex trade. It wasn't legal or illegal. It was okay to sell sex. It was okay to pay for sex. It wasn't okay to curb. It was illegal to curb crawl or to solicit for sex. That was illegal. But paying or selling sex was okay. But if we had the Nordic model back then, I mean, I would have also received the message that it isn't okay to pay for sex. And maybe some part of me might have wondered why, might have been curious why, might have planted a seed of, it's not okay what they're doing to you, instead of it just being okay and actually celebrated. So it's important for men to know that it's not okay to pay for sex. And part of that, I think, is that reason of, like, despite what I've seen in my life and despite my role models and despite the messaging I've received and the blatant let's go to the brothel stuff that happened with that person you're talking about, I have this message, it isn't okay. So on some level they might also receive that message that like what happened there wasn't okay. How all this came to be for me wasn't okay either. Maybe, I mean, maybe I'm a massive idealist. So, who knows? But that is part of the law, is to like denormalize paying for sex, this massively misogynistic system, to like denormalize and be like, it's actually not okay. And I think that would, yeah.
How about John Sweets, where they're arrested, and let's put their picture and name in the paper while we're at it.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting here in Ireland when there was I think this was before, yeah, this was a long time ago now, but so it's always been illegal to curb crawl. So the police did a thing where they pretended to be women on the street in prostitution in a city here called Limerick, and I can't remember, 11 men or something were arrested that night, because the women just hung around and the men came and said, solicited them, and then they were arrested. The newspaper in Limerick, or the Limerick Leader, refused. So usually, you know, as you said, the names and addresses and everything is published in the newspaper. They refused to publish the names and addresses.
Can we say the men running the newspapers
Oh, I'd imagine
used to
it was
publish the names?
Yeah, I'd imagine it was men. Isn't that
Because,
so
yeah, because like if we think about this for half a minute, if 1 in 5 men are sex buyers, then 1 in 5 newspaper editors, judges, lawyers, cops, doctors, businessmen are sex buyers.
Yeah, they were protecting their own. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was really interesting. The response that everybody was, not everybody, but a lot of people, from my observations anyway, were really outraged that this happened to these men. They were like sympathizing with them and saying like their families are, you know, this is terrible that they're being named in other papers. You know, they were named in other papers, just not in the Limerick one.
Oh, they were named in other papers.
In other papers, yeah. But
were men outraged, or were women also outraged?
I can't remember, but I would imagine it was a mixture of both. Kind of saying like, you know, it's not fair in their families and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, if somebody robs a car and their name's in the paper, nobody's like, oh, their poor families shouldn't have to be put through this. It's like, so why do we protect the sex trade so much? I mean, I get it in some ways. I get it. I think I understand why women protect the sex trade, and it's like we can't bear to look at what actually happens in it, because that would mean looking at what could happen to me, and it means looking with clear eyes at what's going on between men and women and how oppressed women really are and how they really get treated. But if I can turn it into something that's like good for women, then it's no longer, if I can like reframe it sort of, then it's like no longer this oppressive thing, but actually I'm in charge of it and it's good for women. And we need to support sex workers and all this shit. Do you know, it's like a real like flip around.
Yeah, you've just sort of encapsulated the mindset of the pro-sex worker defenders.
Yeah.
Right? And it seems to be a coping mechanism or trauma response to justify it's like justifying the horror of their existence by reframing it into something more palatable.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that you don't hear from trafficking victims. You know, you don't hear from women at the really powerless end of the spectrum. You hear mostly from like a middle class educated young women. I'm not blaming these women. Like I understand, I have a lot of compassion for them actually. I understand what they're doing. But it's it's a way to survive the status quo, as opposed to kind of looking clearly at the status quo and saying this isn't okay, this is fucked up. Because that's too hard, that's too painful, I think, to look at that. You know, it's like it's denial, being in denial. So then of course you get survivors saying like this happened to me and it's bad. You're like, you're a liar.
Yeah.
You know, what you said wasn't accurate, like you're just a sob story, you know, you're a professional survivor, you're making it up. It just goes on like
yeah. It's sort of like cancel culture, right? Your narrative is completely threatening to what we're doing, and so we'll cancel you, or we'll basically minimize and disregard your. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to someone that lived it. I believe what you say, and I put more weight on it than anyone else that I would talk to, except, you know, that's why I talk to people like you and Jill and Andrea, because you want the truth. There it is. You were there, right?
And that's why you're a threat to the kind of pro-sex trade advocates. You're such a threat to that because you are telling the truth. They know you're telling the truth, so they feel the need to like discredit you to make other people not buy into it because it's too frightening. I think for them, it's too painful for them to have to acknowledge what's really going on. It's awful. It's awful what goes on in the pro-sex trade, pro-abolition.
Yeah. Well, I see it to not the degree you do, but in my profession, there's I don't know how we got infected with this, but you know, I was doing a lunch and learn for a group of psychotherapists in the area. They asked me to do it and talking about treating compulsive sexual behaviors, and they were the one young young woman, probably in her mid-20s. I could tell was prepared for me and led with, "What do you think of ethical porn?" And then mentioned sex workers, something about sex workers, right? And so it's hard for me to remain calm, and my head like wants to blow up. And then I remind myself, she's 25 and she holds her beliefs based on the information that she's been exposed to. That's it.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I haven't used porn in 16 years. I used to think porn was great. It was just
and normal,
beautiful people that liked having sex,
yeah,
and they did it in front of a camera, and no one got hurt. That's literally the depth of my critical analysis.
I mean, if there even
Right?
is, and even that is like a lot of analysis, even going that far to thinking about, well, nobody's getting hurt here. Even to go that far, I think is more than most men are. They just click on their phone, do it, done. They don't know thinking about like anything else apart from getting off. And that's the thing. If you know, and then I'm not going to go on about. There's something that happens for men and women after sex, after using porn, and I'm not a porn expert at all here, where they feel really bad about themselves after, and they feel this kind of weird sense of they might not even be aware of it, but this is just something that's come up in conversations and stuff like that, where a feeling of like shame, I guess, is the word.
Oh, 100%. It's very shame producing.
And then we just kind of go, oh, whatever, it's fine, just get on with the day. And doesn't that tell? Doesn't that? I'm not speculating, but I'm kind of speaking hypothetically, anecdotally. But doesn't that tell you so much about you, what's going on for you? I'm not even talking about the people in the porn, in the film, but like what's going on for you, that disconnection that happened for you, that dehumanizing of yourself as you engage with it. And how different it is when you get off on your own without the need for porn. You don't feel that shame after. And like, anyway, I'm just kind of talking from conversations and stuff, so I don't know. But there's been a lot of those kind of conversations that I've had with people about the difference, especially because I'm very interested in what the world would look like if our sexuality hadn't been prescribed to us through
Wow.
Right?
I love that. I love it.
Yeah, porn prescribes it. It tells us.
Yeah, it's a sex education.
Yeah, this is what men do in porn, and this is how women respond. This is how men have sex, and this is how women respond to that. Is that what happens, right? So the girls learn, oh, this is how I have to act, and the guys learn, this is what I have to do. To be basic, I know it's a basic.
So you're bang on. You're bang on.
So if little 11-year-olds weren't exposed to that, how would their sexuality develop? Through their own thoughts, feelings, through looking at, whatever, however it happens, without it being this extremely ham-handed, blunt, explicit, this is what it is thing that goes straight into the nervous system, that lays down new neural pathways of porn. This is what sex is, this is what sex is, this is what a woman is, this is what a man is. That happens so quickly, and so for a little tiny brain, that little teenage brain that's developing so much and so malleable, with no other context to defend against as well, because that's their first experience of sex, is looking up. They're 11 years old or 12 years old looking at porn. That's their first experience of having a sexuality. like I'm grateful that that wasn't my experience, that porn, I didn't see any porn until I was about 17 or 16 or 17, because we just had a giant computer in the middle of the house. You know, it was like you
Right.
didn't have a
Hard to
smartphone.
access it.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And you know, yeah, you just kind of wouldn't. Yeah, I'm really grateful, even though I had my own kind of fucked up situation. I'm very grateful that that wasn't already a thing for me, because that could have made it so much worse for me.
Mhm.
Now you've got 11-year-old boys, and like I said, that's their first experience of their own sexuality is through porn.
I have lots I can say about that too, but we don't have time. Okay, so yeah, it's been 2 hours. Yeah,
Mhm.
we need to wrap it up. I'm really enjoying our conversation, and I want to talk. Maybe we'll have to do a follow up, part 2 to this.
Sure.
I know that from the book that you have been out 10 years, you went on to go back to school, got a degree, and are now a registered psychotherapist like myself. And it's just amazing and so cool. And you're the first person I've ever interviewed that's also a psychotherapist. So
Yeah.
I just think that's really cool. So let's table it there for now. There's just so much good stuff. And then maybe we can revisit this conversation in a few months and finish up some of those questions, and maybe a little bit about your journey coming out of that, the effects that it had on you and how you overcame that, if you want to share about that. And this is maybe to give hope. Maybe if you're a woman watching this and you're either in the trade or just getting out or wanting to get out, this might be a good conversation to have, Mia, and to give hope for those women as well. You think?
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. Well, let's wrap it up there. Mia, thank you so much again for being so gracious with your time and your story, and sharing that with me. And we'll look forward to connecting again down the road.
Thanks
So
so much.
we'll sign off. Bye for now.
Thanks a million.
Okay.